The night had fallen heavy over the outpost, and the world outside the walls was nothing but shadows, smoke and silence broken only by the wind. She stood there, rifle in hand, armor dented from battles already fought, her body trembling with exhaustion that she refused to admit. The others had said she would break, that no one could withstand the enemy tide for long, that sooner or later she would collapse and the line would fall. But she wasn't built for surrender. Every scar carved across her face, every ache deep in her bones, was proof that she had already outlasted what life had thrown at her. Tonight would be no different. Tonight she would not let them through. The enemy had been testing the defenses since dusk, probing for weakness, looking for hesitation. She had seen their shadows darting between the ruined vehicles outside the perimeter, heard the metallic scrape of their weapons as they prepared for another wave. She knew they were gathering, waiting for the right moment to swarm. The radio on her shoulder was filled with static now. No reinforcements, no command, no voice but her own. She had sent the others away earlier, the wounded and the frightened, forcing them to retreat to safer ground while she stayed behind to buy them time. She had not told them the truth, that she expected not to see another dawn. That truth was hers alone, locked tight behind clenched teeth and eyes that never wavered. The floodlights had long since gone dark after the generators were hit, leaving her with only the pale glow of the moon, fractured by drifting clouds of ash. She crouched low behind the sandbags, fingers tightening on her weapon, ears tuned to every sound beyond the wall. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until it broke with the sudden crack of gunfire in the distance. Then came the shouts, guttural and foreign, carried by the wind, and she knew the storm was coming again. She braced herself, her heartbeat steadying into the rhythm of battle, a drum she had lived with for too long. When the first figures burst from the dark, charging low and fast, she opened fire. The muzzle flashes tore through the night, painting her silhouette in bursts of fire and shadow. Each shot was deliberate, measured, precise. She wasn't wasting ammunition, not now, not ever. Bodies fell, some screaming, some silent, but more came. Always more. The air filled with smoke, with sparks from grenades that rattled against the barricades, with a metallic taste of blood and cordite that clung to the back of her throat. She pressed her shoulder harder against the rifle stock, her body jerking with every shot, but her mind was cold, sharp, and merciless. The enemy believed she was just one woman, alone, soon to be broken. They didn't know that she had made a promise to herself. They would not pass here, not while she still breathed. Minutes stretched into hours. Her arms burned from the weight of her weapon, her ears rang from the unending gunfire, and still she fought. When her rifle clicked empty, she slammed another magazine into place without hesitation, fingers moving from habit carved by countless battles before. When they tried to scale the wall, she met them with fire, blade, and bare fists if she had to. When explosions shook the earth, she stayed rooted, unyielding. The world narrowed to the barricade before her and the endless sea of shadows rushing against it. Time blurred. She had no sense of how long she had been holding them off, only the measure of each heartbeat, each breath, each shot. Her body screamed at her to rest, to stop, but her will was iron, forged by pain, by memory, by loss. She thought of those she had saved, the ones who now had a chance to live because she stood here. She thought of the voices of her comrades, the laughter that had once filled these walls before the war burned everything down. She thought of the faces of the fallen, those who had died believing in her, and she carried them like armor on her back. The enemy surged again, closer this time, their weapons clattering against the sandbags as they tried to tear through. She met them at the breach, her rifle now hot in her hands, its barrel glowing faintly from the endless fire. Smoke stung her eyes, sweat blurred her vision, but she saw them all the same, each enemy who dared to cross. And she cut them down. She lost track of how many fell. Dozens, maybe hundreds. The ground before the wall became a graveyard, bodies sprawled in heaps, dark blood soaking into the dirt. Still more came, their shouts rising into a chorus of rage and desperation. Still she did not falter. Her lips curled into a grim smile despite the pain lancing through her chest. Let them come, she thought. Let them all come. She would meet them here, every last one, until her strength was gone and her heart beat its final note. But not yet. Not tonight. She was not done. She would not break. The night dragged on, and her body had become a vessel of pain and defiance. Every muscle screamed, her hands blistered from the heat of her weapon, but her spirit refused to yield. The enemy had not expected this. They had thought the outpost would fall within minutes, that the lone defender would crumble after the first wave, but she was still there, a shadow against the sandbags, a storm of fire against their advance. They began to whisper her name among themselves, not as a soldier but as something else, a curse perhaps, or a legend taking shape in blood and smoke. She could hear them when the wind shifted, voices speaking in harsh tones, uncertain now, hesitating where before they had rushed. That hesitation gave her a cruel satisfaction. Fear was a weapon too, and she wielded it as well as any rifle. She used every second, every heartbeat to prepare for the next onslaught. Between assaults she scavenged what she could, crawling across the battered ground to retrieve fallen weapons, pulling ammunition from the dead, both friend and foe. Her hands were slick with blood as she stuffed magazines into her vest, not caring whose it was, only that it could fire when she needed it to. She had long since stopped feeling revulsion. War had burned that out of her years ago. Survival left no room for hesitation. When the next wave came, it was heavier. They had brought heavier weapons now, mortars that whistled through the night and detonated against the barricade with thunderous force. The sandbags burst, shrapnel tearing through her arm, but she gritted her teeth and kept firing. Her blood poured down, soaking into her sleeve, but she barely registered it. Pain was a constant companion now, just another voice among many. Dust and smoke filled her lungs, choking her, but she coughed it out and rose again. Through the haze she saw them charging, wave after wave, relentless and hungry. She met them with the ferocity of a cornered beast, every shot an act of defiance, every kill a scream of survival. Her weapon grew hot, almost unbearable to hold, so she discarded it when it jammed and seized another from the dead at her feet. She moved with instinct, swift and merciless, like the battlefield itself had claimed her as its avatar. They expected her to break. She answered with fire. Hours slipped by, though she no longer kept count. Her sense of time fractured, splintered by the rhythm of battle. Only the moon's slow crawl across the sky gave her any measure, a cruel reminder that the night was still far from over. Her throat was raw from the acrid smoke, her lips cracked, her eyes burning, but her focus never wavered. She thought of those who had escaped because she stayed. She pictured them running through the dark, carrying with them the fragile thread of survival, and she clung to that image as fiercely as she clung to her weapon. That was her purpose, her reason for every breath she still drew. The enemy, frustrated now, grew more reckless. They pushed harder, faster, their discipline fraying at the edges. She exploited that, targeting leaders, breaking their formations, sowing chaos among their ranks. She moved with precision, conserving every bullet, every ounce of strength, but the weight of exhaustion dragged at her bones. Her vision blurred, her hands trembled, and still she fought. Her world had shrunk to the wall, the dirt beneath her boots, the endless tide before her. The battlefield was no longer just a place, it was a crucible, and she was being forged into something harder than steel. Blood soaked the ground, thick and dark, mingling with the shattered remains of grenades and the twisted metal of broken weapons. The smell of death hung heavy, suffocating, but she breathed it in like fuel. Each breath reminded her that she was still alive, still standing, still fighting. They would not break her. Not here. Not now. She could feel her body weakening, though. Her left arm barely lifted, numb from the shrapnel wound, and every step felt like wading through water. Her knees threatened to buckle, but her will held them steady. She leaned against the wall for support when no one was watching, her body trembling, but when the next charge came, she rose again like a specter, a phantom that refused to die. Her enemies saw it and faltered. To them she seemed unstoppable, unkillable, and that illusion was as powerful as any weapon. Still they came, desperate, enraged, trying to bury her beneath sheer numbers. Still she cut them down, her hands slick, her breath ragged, her vision swimming. The night seemed endless, each second stretched into eternity, but she clung to the promise she had made, they would not pass. And so she endured hour after hour, through blood, through smoke, through fire and shadow. Alone, against the tide, she held the line, her breath came ragged now, a harsh rasp that echoed inside her helmet, every inhale burning her lungs, every exhale carrying the weight of exhaustion she dared not show. The ground around her was a graveyard, littered with the fallen, weapons broken, blood soaking into the dirt, smoke drifting like ghosts of the dead. She was the last figure still standing, and though her legs trembled with every step, she held her weapon like it was an extension of her own soul. Her enemies had pulled back for a moment, regrouping beyond the ruins, their voices rising in angry shouts, the clatter of their weapons echoing in the distance. They had thrown everything they could at her, and still she remained, a lone sentinel refusing to yield. She leaned against the battered barricade, her head bowed for a fleeting second, and in that moment her mind slipped to memories she had buried deep. She thought of her mother's voice, soft and warm, telling her as a child that strength was not in muscle but in spirit. She thought of the day she joined the service, her comrades laughing and teasing her, doubting she would last a week. She thought of those same comrades now, many buried, many gone, and how she carried their memory like a blade across her heart. She whispered their names under her breath, a prayer, a promise that she would not fail them. When the enemy charged again, she pushed herself upright and met them head-on. Her rifle barked fire, each shot precise even though her hands shook with fatigue. The recoil jolted through her battered body, but she steadied herself, refusing to miss. She cut them down as they came, relentless, determined, screaming as they rushed the barricade. She heard their boots pounding against the earth, felt the ground tremble with their numbers, and still she held. A grenade exploded close enough to throw her back against the wall, her ears ringing, her vision swimming, blood running from her temple. For a heartbeat the world went silent, a void of blackness pulling her down. But she clawed her way back, dragging herself upright, weapon in hand, defiance burning in her eyes. She spat blood and raised her rifle, her voice hoarse as she shouted into the night, daring them to come closer. Her roar was swallowed by the chaos, but it fueled her spirit, ignited something inside her that would not die. She was more than a soldier now. She was the wall itself, the last line between survival and annihilation, and she would not crumble. The enemy pressed harder, swarming the barricade, their silhouettes rising in the smoke like phantoms. She fought them in close quarters now, rifle swinging like a club when ammunition ran dry, blade flashing in desperate arcs. Her body screamed with every motion, her vision narrowed to tunnels of fire and shadow, but she refused to let go. Each strike, each kill was another second stolen, another breath bought for those who had fled. She could feel her strength draining, slipping through her like sand, but her will was iron, her spirit unyielding. Hours had passed, though she no longer counted them. The sky above was beginning to pale, the first hints of dawn creeping at the edges of the darkness. She saw it and felt a surge of fire in her chest. If she could hold until sunrise, if she could endure just a little longer, perhaps reinforcements would see the smoke and come. Perhaps those she had saved would reach safety. Perhaps this stand would mean something greater than her own death. That thought was enough to drive her forward, enough to force her battered body into motion again. She reloaded with trembling hands, ignoring the pain, ignoring the blood dripping from wounds she no longer had the strength to bind. She fired into the dark, each shot a declaration, each bullet a promise that she was still alive, still fighting. The enemy faltered once more, uncertain now, their charge breaking against her defiance. She saw it in their movements, the hesitation, the fear. They had believed she would break, that no one could endure such a storm, but she had endured, and that alone had shaken them. She leaned against the wall, chest heaving, sweat and blood mixing on her face, and she whispered again the names of the fallen. They gave her strength. They gave her purpose. And when the enemy tried again, she rose to meet them, unbreakable, unyielding, the lone flame in a night of endless shadow. The pale streaks of dawn crept slowly across the sky, washing the battlefield in a dim gray light that revealed the devastation in cruel detail. Bodies lay scattered in heaps, the air thick with the acrid stench of gunpowder and blood, the once sturdy barricade reduced to crumbling sandbags and twisted metal. She stood in the midst of it all, swaying slightly, her body broken but her eyes burning with the same fire that had carried her through the endless night. Her armor was shredded, her arms streaked with blood, both hers and her enemies', and her rifle rattled with every shot as if ready to fall apart, but she did not stop. The enemy regrouped once more beyond the haze, their numbers thinned but their resolve hardened. They were determined to end her defiance, to crush the legend that was beginning to rise around her, the lone figure who had denied them for so many hours. She could see their commanders shouting, pointing, forcing their soldiers forward. Fear rippled through their ranks, she could feel it, but discipline held them together. They would come again, stronger, angrier, desperate to erase her existence. She tightened her grip on her weapon, ignoring the tremor in her fingers, ignoring the way her knees threatened to buckle beneath her. She whispered to herself, not a prayer this time but a promise, a vow that she would see this through to the end. Her lips cracked and bled as she spoke, but the words gave her strength. She lifted her rifle and steadied her aim, her breath coming in ragged bursts. When they charged, she fired, the muzzle flash illuminating her weary face, her eyes wide and unblinking. Each shot struck with precision born not of strength but of sheer will. She was beyond exhaustion now, moving on instinct alone, her body running on the final reserves of energy buried deep in her spirit. She did not think of survival anymore. She thought only of time, time bought with every bullet, every strike, every heartbeat that kept her standing. She thought of the faces of the young soldiers she had sent away, their eyes filled with fear and hope as she had told them to run. She thought of what it would mean if she fell now, if the line collapsed before the dawn had fully broken. That thought was enough to keep her fighting when her body begged her to fall. The enemy surged closer, bullets tearing past her, explosions rocking the barricade. She moved like a shadow, rising and firing, ducking and striking, her body battered but her spirit blazing. When her rifle emptied, she drew her sidearm. When the sidearm emptied, she took up a fallen blade, slashing in desperate arcs that painted the dirt red. She fought with everything she had, every motion fueled by rage and love, by grief and defiance. She had become the embodiment of the battlefield, a storm of violence and endurance that refused to be silenced. Her enemies screamed as they rushed, their voices filled with fury, but beneath it she heard something else. Fear, raw and desperate, the sound of men who realized they were fighting not just a soldier but something greater. She could see it in their eyes when they closed in, the flicker of hesitation before her blade struck, the disbelief when she refused to fall even as blood poured from her wounds. They had believed she would break, that she would crumble under their weight, but every second she remained standing shattered that belief and replaced it with dread. The minutes bled into one another, the light in the sky growing stronger, the horizon glowing faintly with the promise of the sun. She clung to that light, forcing herself to endure just a little longer, telling herself that if she could hold until the first rays broke through the smoke, she would have won. Her chest burned with every breath, her vision swam with black spots, but she gritted her teeth and fought on. She staggered, fell to one knee but forced herself up again, her blade dripping, her pistol smoking. She screamed as she charged into them, a raw, primal sound that tore from her throat, echoing across the battlefield. It was not the scream of fear but of defiance, of a warrior who had embraced her fate and would drag her enemies into the abyss with her if that was what it took. They fell before her fury, stumbling back, their formation breaking, their courage faltering in the face of her relentless stand. She cut them down, one after another, her movements fueled by sheer willpower, her body long past its limits. The earth trembled with the clash, the sky painted in ash and fire, and through it all she stood unbroken. The dawn was rising, and with it came the strength of her resolve, a fire brighter than the sun itself. She would not break. Not now. Not ever. The first rays of the sun broke through the smoke, shafts of gold piercing the gray haze and casting long shadows across the battlefield. She saw it, and for a moment her heart surged with something close to triumph. She had held the line through the long and merciless night, and though her body was battered and broken, she was still standing. Her enemies had not expected this, had not prepared for a lone soldier to endure 12 hours of relentless assault. The dawn revealed their failure in the piles of their dead that littered the ground, in the hesitation in their eyes as they faced her once more. Yet the enemy did not retreat. Their commanders bellowed orders, their banners rose in the distance, and fresh soldiers emerged from the smoke, drawn into the storm by duty or fear. She knew they would not stop until she was gone, and she also knew she had little left to give. Her arms felt as heavy as stone, her legs barely obeyed her commands, and the blood loss had left her dizzy, her vision swimming. But her spirit had not broken, and so long as her spirit held, she would fight. She lifted her weapon again, though it rattled in her grip, and leveled it at the approaching tide. The sun warmed her face, mingling with the sweat and blood, and she felt a strange calm settle over her. She had already given everything, and yet she found something more to give. When they charged again, she welcomed them with fire, bullets cutting through the dawn light, her shots echoing like thunder. The battlefield became chaos once more, the clash of steel and the roar of guns filling the air. She fought with the desperation of one who knew this was the end, every strike fierce, every shot purposeful. She was not fighting for survival anymore, she was fighting to leave a mark, to ensure that her defiance would never be forgotten. She wanted them to remember her, to carry her name as a curse, to speak in hushed tones of the woman who stood against an army and refused to fall. The enemy pressed harder, their numbers overwhelming, and she felt herself falter, stumbling back as blows rained down. A blade slashed across her side, hot blood pouring down her ribs, but she bit back the pain and struck back with fury, her knife plunging into the throat of the soldier before her. Another came and she shot him point blank, the recoil knocking her to the ground. For a moment the world spun, the sky and earth blurring together, but she forced herself up again, teeth bared, eyes blazing. They shouted as they saw her rise once more, a sound of disbelief, of fear, and she used it against them, charging forward with a scream that tore through the morning air. She slammed into them with the ferocity of a storm, her blade carving arcs of crimson, her pistol cracking until it clicked empty. She seized another weapon from the ground, firing wildly, striking, cutting, refusing to stop. Her body was a wreck, wounds gaping, blood soaking her armor, but she had become something more than flesh and bone. She was will itself, hardened by pain, sharpened by sacrifice, unstoppable until her heart ceased to beat. The sun climbed higher, burning away the smoke, revealing the true scale of the carnage. The ground was a sea of bodies, the barricade nothing more than rubble, the air thick with the cries of the dying. She stood in the center of it, a solitary figure drenched in blood, her shadow long against the rising light. The enemy faltered once more, hesitation spreading like wildfire through their ranks. They had thrown everything at her, yet she still endured. She saw it in their eyes, the doubt, the fear, the cracks in their resolve, and she felt a grim satisfaction. Even if she fell now, she had broken them in spirit. She had become a symbol, and symbols did not die. She staggered, nearly collapsing, her vision narrowing, but she steadied herself against the wall of sandbags and forced her weapon up again. Her arms shook violently, her knees buckled, but she did not lower it. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her surrender. She had promised herself she would not break, and promises mattered even in death. The sun bathed her in light now, a golden glow that made her seem almost otherworldly, a warrior carved from fire and stone. She raised her voice, raw and cracked, and shouted across the battlefield, daring them to come, daring them to test her again. The sound carried through the smoke, and the silence that followed was heavy, thick with awe and fear. She had won more than just time. She had carved her legend into the earth itself, and no force could erase it. The enemy hesitated at the edge of the killing ground, their commanders shouting, pushing, but even fear of discipline could not fully drown the terror that had rooted itself in their bones. She stood alone, drenched in blood, weapon trembling in her grip, her armor shredded and glistening with fresh wounds, yet her eyes still burned like coals in the dawn. To them she looked less like a soldier and more like an apparition, a specter born of war, the embodiment of defiance itself. They had faced countless battles, storms of fire and steel, but never had they seen one person hold back an army for so long. The disbelief was in their eyes, the doubt in their movements, and she fed on it like a starving wolf. Every second they wavered was another second bought for those she had saved, another piece of victory carved into the impossible. She could feel her strength slipping away now, every breath shallow, every heartbeat a labor. Her body screamed with agony, her wounds open and raw, her vision hazy with blood loss. Each step felt like a mountain climbed, her weapon heavier than stone, yet she forced herself upright, forced her arms to steady, forced her voice to rise above the chaos. She shouted at them again, daring them, cursing them, taunting them with words that clawed at their courage. Her voice was ragged, but it carried, and they flinched to hear it. For all their numbers, for all their weapons, they could not silence her spirit. That realization tore at their will. Their commanders ordered another charge, desperate to finish what should have been over long ago. The soldiers surged forward, but the momentum was broken, their lines frayed, their steps slower, their eyes darting to the carnage that awaited them. She braced herself, planting her boots in the blood-soaked earth, lifting her rifle with trembling hands. The sun's light caught her face, highlighting every scar, every streak of dirt and blood, making her look carved from the battlefield itself. When they came, she fired, the shots echoing like thunder across the plain. Her body shook with each recoil, her wounds tearing wider, but she did not miss. One by one they fell, cut down by her defiance, their screams swallowed by the roar of gunfire. When her rifle emptied, she switched weapons. When that ran dry, she swung her blade. Her movements were slower now, less precise but no less deadly. She fought with desperation, every strike carrying the weight of survival itself. A spear of pain lanced through her chest as a blade cut across her ribs, and for a moment the world dimmed. She staggered back, blood filling her mouth, but she spat it out and roared, slamming her knife into her attacker's throat. She could not afford weakness, not here, not now. Her enemies saw it, and their hesitation deepened. They expected her to collapse with every blow, but she did not. She kept rising, kept fighting, kept defying the reality of flesh and bone. She was no longer a soldier in their eyes. She was a nightmare, a force that refused to die. The minutes stretched like hours, the sun climbing higher, the battlefield drenched in light now. She blinked against the glare, her body swaying, her vision fading in and out, but she refused to fall. She thought of the ones she had saved, imagined them reaching safety, imagined them telling her story. She thought of her comrades who had fallen before her, imagined them standing at her side now, lending her their strength. She whispered their names again, each one a spark that kept her burning. She felt herself slipping, the darkness at the edges of her vision growing stronger, but every time it threatened to claim her, she forced herself back with sheer will. She would not let go. Not yet. The enemy broke once more, retreating in disarray, their commanders shouting, striking at them to push them forward. She sagged against the barricade, chest heaving, her weapon limp in her hands. For a moment she let herself breathe, just breathe, the sun warm on her face. She knew she was nearly done, her body at its end, but she had bought more than just time. She had broken them. She had taken their certainty and shattered it, carved fear into their hearts, and that was victory enough. She lifted her weapon again, slow, deliberate, her hands trembling so hard she could barely aim. She pointed it at the horizon where they gathered once more, and though her lips were cracked and bleeding, a smile curved across them. They had believed she would break. And yet here she was, unbroken still, a single soul holding back the tide, her legend written in fire and blood. The battlefield was no longer a place of tactics or orders, no longer a clash of armies, but a crucible in which one woman's will was tested against the weight of an entire enemy force. Smoke drifted across the field like ghosts, the stench of blood and death suffocating the air, and still she stood. Her legs trembled beneath her, her chest heaved with each ragged breath, but her eyes, those eyes of unyielding fire, never dimmed. Her enemies lingered in the distance, shadows against the rising sun, whispering among themselves, unwilling to step forward again. She had held them for 12 hours, 12 brutal, merciless hours of gunfire, steel and blood, and though she had bled for every second, she had not broken. Yet she knew it was not over. Their commanders raged, their pride wounded, their voices carrying through the morning air as they barked for another push. She saw the soldiers shift uneasily, saw fear thick in their movements. They had begun to see her less as a soldier and more as a curse, a figure too stubborn to die, too fierce to surrender. She leaned heavily on the ruins of the barricade, her weapon drooping in her hands, her entire body screaming for release. A part of her longed to collapse, to sink into the dirt and let the darkness take her, but she forced it back. She had lasted this long, longer than any of them could have imagined, and she would last until her body gave nothing more. She lifted her head, spat blood from her cracked lips, and stood tall once again. She wanted them to see her rise. She wanted them to see that even now, even broken and bleeding, she would not kneel. Her defiance was a blade sharper than any weapon she carried, and it cut deeper than bullets ever could. She raised her voice, hoarse and broken, but loud enough to carry, daring them again, demanding that they come if they had the courage. The silence that followed stretched long, broken only by the groans of the dying. Then the commanders forced them forward again, desperate to end what had become humiliation. She braced herself, planting her feet in the blood-soaked earth, raising her rifle though her arms trembled violently. The soldiers came, their steps reluctant, their eyes wide with fear, and she answered them with fire. The shots cracked through the dawn, one after another, her aim faltering but still deadly, her weapon roaring until it clicked empty. She dropped it and seized another from the ground, firing again, her body racked with pain but her spirit soaring. Each time they thought she would fall, she rose. Each time they thought she was finished, she struck back. The ground beneath her was slick with blood, her boots slipping, but she moved with the fury of someone who had embraced her own death and turned it into a weapon. They reached her, clashing in brutal close quarters, steel against steel, blade against blade. She fought with feral determination, her knife flashing, her fist striking, her screams echoing through the chaos. A sword tore into her shoulder, but she answered with a knife to the gut. A spear grazed her neck, but she twisted and slammed her blade into her attacker's chest. Her body was a canvas of wounds, each one another weight dragging her down, but she refused to stop. Her enemies fell around her, their cries mingling with the clash, their fear feeding her rage. They could not comprehend how she still moved, how she still killed, how she still stood. They had believed she would break hours ago, yet here she was, unbroken, unstoppable, a storm of blood and steel. Her vision blurred, blackness creeping at the edges, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but she forced herself forward, every strike an act of pure will. She became a blur of movement, a silhouette against the rising sun, her shadow long and defiant. The soldiers faltered again, their charge breaking, their courage collapsing like brittle glass. They staggered back, retreating despite their orders, eyes wide with terror. She stood swaying, her blade dripping, her body broken, but her spirit triumphant. She had shattered them, not just in body but in soul. She leaned heavily on her weapon, blood streaming down her side, her breath shallow. The world tilted, the ground shifting beneath her, but she locked her knees and refused to fall. She had endured 12 hours of hell, 12 hours of fury, 12 hours of defiance. Her body was at its end, but her heart still thundered, refusing to yield. She lifted her face to the sky, the sun blazing above, and whispered to herself that she had kept her promise. She had not broken. She would not break. The battlefield had fallen eerily silent, the kind of silence that followed storms, heavy and thick, filled with ghosts of screams and the metallic stench of blood. She swayed where she stood, her weapon hanging at her side, her armor soaked red, her face pale with exhaustion and loss. The sun was high now, burning away the last of the night, revealing the devastation she had wrought. Dozens of enemy bodies lay strewn in the dirt, their weapons clutched in lifeless hands, their eyes wide with disbelief even in death. The ground was a tapestry of her defiance, every smear of blood, every shattered weapon, every corpse a testament to the 12 hours she had endured. She could hear them beyond the haze, the remnants of the enemy force gathering at a distance, their whispers carried on the wind. They did not cheer, they did not rush forward. They lingered in hesitation, their courage broken, their resolve fractured. She had not only held them back, she had infected them with fear, carved her name into their hearts as something more dangerous than steel. She wanted to laugh at that thought, but the act would have taken more strength than she had left. Her lungs rattled with every breath, her limbs barely responding, her body demanding surrender. Yet surrender was not in her blood. She leaned heavily against the ruins of the barricade, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun touch her face. She thought of the ones she had bought time for, the comrades who had escaped because she had chosen to stand. She imagined them alive, far from this place, carrying her story forward. She imagined their voices speaking of her not as a victim but as a shield, as the one who had refused to let the line fall. That thought alone gave her strength, fragile but real, enough to straighten her spine again, enough to open her eyes and stare once more at the horizon. The enemy did not advance. Their commanders barked orders, their flags waved, but the soldiers did not move. They had seen too much, lost too much, and their will was gone. They could kill her body, yes, but they had already lost the war of spirit. They had fought a woman who should have broken within the first hour, who should have collapsed long before the night ended, and instead they had been ground into fear by her defiance. They hesitated because they did not want to face her again. She lifted her weapon slowly, every motion agony, and leveled it at them with trembling hands. She did not need to fire. The sight alone was enough to send ripples of unease through their ranks, their steps faltering, their courage crumbling further. She smiled faintly, a small bloody curve of her lips, and lowered the weapon again. Her work was done. She had held them, broken them, endured longer than anyone could have imagined. The rest no longer mattered. Her knees buckled, the ground rushing up to meet her, but even as she fell, she did so with dignity, rolling onto her back and staring at the blazing sky. The sun painted her face in gold, hiding the blood, softening the lines of exhaustion, making her look almost peaceful. She let her eyes close, not in defeat but in completion, her heart swelling with the knowledge that she had fulfilled her promise. She had not broken. Around her, the enemy dared not advance, their fear deeper than any command could overcome. They lingered in uncertainty, haunted by the sight of one soldier who had fought them to a standstill. Her legend had already been written, not in ink but in blood and fire, in whispers and terror. In the days to come, her story would spread through both armies, of the lone defender who held off an entire force for 12 hours straight, who fought until the sun rose and beyond, who became a symbol that could not be destroyed. Her comrades, when they heard of it, would speak her name with pride, their grief tempered by awe. The enemy would speak it too, their voices hushed, their eyes shadowed with the memory of her defiance. Her body lay still at last, but her spirit towered above them all. The battlefield belonged to her, not because she had survived but because she had proven unbreakable. And in war, sometimes that was the greater victory. The end.